Welcome to the show this week, Jay, and we're got a few things that we're going to review. And I think one of the things that we had talked about, really the big thing, is obviously we're both at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we're all sick and tired of doing this. But it is what it is. But I don't think, a lot of times we had talked about it, certainly some of the other shows that we had, is more specifically and really more locally what's going on with COVID and what we're seeing outside of what you're hearing from the big media. And I know I've had COVID. Monte, I know that
Me too.
You said you had COVID. You and
I believe so. Yep.
We both have kids. The kids are coming and going out of different types of schools. And, when I went over and my experience on COVID, and this is, small town, rural Iowa.
Yeah.
We're looking at a town at 12,000, about an hour away outside of Des Moines. So that puts us, in the middle of flyover country, which, everybody thinks that we're apparently a bunch of Trump-hating or loving rednecks.
says
got our guns.
Says the pilot who flies over Iowa constantly.
Right. Says the pilot that flies over Iowa. It has the American flag in the background and the gun on his hip right now. So,
Yep.
Yeah, and I think you're in the same boat too.
I am.
So we're all concealed and with,
I live in a town of 800, so I'm much smaller than that. We just have
it sounds like we're the typical people that most everybody hates.
Mm-hmm.
If you're one of the coastal Democrat type of people out there. But that being said, that's not really what we're trying to focus on. We're trying to focus on what the reality is of our experiences of COVID and with kids and what we've seen out here in quote unquote flyover country.
Mm-hmm.
And, the small hospital that we have here, I went to go get tested, and they actually were discouraging people from getting tested. Now,
why?
I don't think there's a whole bunch of that, before everybody jumps on conspiracy theory land and stuff like that. I think I'm not exactly sure what's happening, but after talking with some of the doctors and a lot of people and a lot of staff over there, a lot of those stuff was limited on what they can do. I mean, they have such a flood of people coming in, and the big push from the media is, as soon as you have it, go get tested, go get tested, go get tested.
But those are New York and LA and stuff. I think that part of it is because you are not in the danger age range. You're healthy, you're in your 30s, 40s. I think that if you were 80, you would be tested. That's just a guess.
Let's talk about this, specifically though. In this particular case, in my particular case, in this particular hospital, they had said they were getting about 450 tests a month. Those tests have been reduced down to 50 tests per month. Now,
that's what they're receiving from. That's what they're receiving from the government.
I don't know where they were coming from. I didn't dive into every detail of where everything was coming from. A lot of that stuff is outside of what our control is. I'm just the guy walking through the front door. I'm just the guy, just like everybody else out there, that's coming in that says, all right, my symptoms came on like on a Friday night. Everything I felt fine during the day came on during kind of a Friday night. And it was just kind of like a simple cold, no big deal. But earlier in the week, I find out that my father had it. So he had tested positives.
Okay.
And there was this big thing. You know what? If you have any type of symptoms, go out and get tested right away. That's
what they tell you.
Yeah. Right. So that makes sense, right? My dad was sick. I was around my dad. I felt bad. I go in on a Saturday. I mean, as soon as I felt something, I went in and got tested. Well, that test came back negative. And I had to beg and plead to get that test because they had this reduction from 450 down to 50. And a lot of these hospitals, again, being in Iowa right now, we're early-ish, December, late November, pretty big hotbed right now where our governor is trying to get a lot of things under control. And, I don't know if it was just kind of limited and they're just saying, hey, you know what, this is what we have.
Did you ask them?
Maybe they looked at me in an age group and said, hey, you're going to be just fine. You don't have any comorbidities. You're not obese. You work out.
Yep.
Nothing screaming at, low oxygen levels or anything like that, or fever.
So they did check your oxygen level and everything.
Yeah, they did. They checked all that.
Sorry, my camera just turned off on me.
A lot of times we don't again, I don't want to go throwing things at any, at the bus at anybody
No.
without, all the facts. But, a lot of times they'll do these things and a lot of things will happen in the background, right? That you don't necessarily know about. Oxygen level's a big one.
Hmm.
If that's not dipping and you don't have a fever and you don't have all of those things, some of those tests have to be reserved. And I understand
You
this for
know,
people that are presenting those symptoms, that they really do need um, a bigger idea for right away. So I certainly understand that.
what we did is we went to Walmart and we got an oximeter, which is a very simple device. It's what your doctor does. They put it on your finger and it tells you your oxygen level. It was about $40, but my mom and dad had COVID. My kids and my wife had COVID while I was down in Texas and Louisiana. So my son went and bought an oximeter, and that let at least my mom and dad know that their oxygen wasn't getting down to the dangerous levels yet.
Right. And as I went through that, everything came back. It comes back negative.
Hmm.
And I don't feel awful on Saturday. Sunday rolls around. I don't feel too bad really. Sunday, I feel like I got kind of a cold. Monday rolls around, still kind of, I was still waiting on that original COVID test from that Saturday. So I had put myself into that quarantine period until that test came back.
Except you
So
came
that's
over to my
right.
house.
So at that time, right. Well, you had already had it, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And we talked about that before. He's like, yeah. Right.
And I was like, I was confident that I had it back on March 3. What told me was my Apple Watch. My Apple Watch told me there was something irregular between my oxygen levels and my pulse rate. And so it actually said, hey, go to the doctor, because it's got the one with the EKG on it, or ECG.
Right.
So it actually told me to go into the doctor. So I did. They didn't have any COVID tests. They only had the flu and all that other stuff. So they ruled everything else out and said, well, maybe you have COVID. I don't know. But I felt like I got run over by a Mack truck. I mean, I was to the euphoric stage where everything was cool, and I saw purple dinosaurs flying over the bed.
Right.
So it was definitely a lack of oxygen at that point.
Well, I didn't feel much, and then I got into probably really got through Monday, and then Tuesday morning. I'm still waiting on the test. The test, was taken on PCM test was taken at the hospital. That was done on a Saturday, and it was due back because of a backlog or whatever the case is. They're looking at getting that. I wouldn't know until my results until Thursday. So really, for the most part, I was in quarantine for sure until Thursday.
So did they do a trace? Did they do the trace on you? Like, who did you come into contact with between Saturday and Thursday?
Okay, and I'll finish. Where this is going. They had no idea at this point. I don't think they're not contact tracing anybody, I don't think, until you come positive, because I had no call from anybody. I had no nothing. So Monday, made it through Monday night, and then I get to Tuesday, and then Tuesday morning, I'm starting to get, a level 10 sore throat.
Yeah.
At this point, I feel like total crap.
Did you have a really bad headache?
Yeah, the headaches started to set in.
Yep.
The headaches were in. Runny nose, the whole 9 yards. And then Tuesday night rolled in, and that's when it really got bad, where the chills set in.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I was just sweating profusely. I was cold. I was up all night. But at no time did I ever have a fever. Now, that being said, I had this damn headache. And so what I was doing was rotating the Tylenol, and, I think it's Tylenol and Advil or Aleve or something. And you rotate those, every 4 to 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, whatever it is, whatever they tell you to do. And so I had gotten out it early. So I don't know if that was controlling the fever and why I never presented a fever up until that point.
Yeah.
And so I was on top of it just because my headache, it was just a crappy ass headache. So then I get through Tuesday, Wednesday is just as bad. Thursday, I still have this screaming sore throat, level 10 sore throat. And then at this point, tests come back. Said, no, you're negative. and I'm in bad shape on Thursday.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, I don't have COVID, right? But I'm in I'm in bad shape. So I go through Thursday and I go through Friday, and then I start hearing a lot of stories of people out there that are getting tested too early. And you don't hear this in the media because it's exactly the opposite. It's go out as soon as you have something, go get tested. It is exactly the opposite of what's happening, and that to me is a very frustrating thing that they're not putting out there. So it got to Friday, I started to feel a little better, and I wasn't feeling great. And then it was on that Thursday again, you know, I couldn't go. I went back and I wanted to go get retested, and they wouldn't retest me. Okay. I mean, again, you've only got so many tests to go around.
Sure.
You've been tested once. They don't want to be testing people. You know, again, if you're in the bigger cities, maybe this is different, but for rural Iowa, this is where we're at. This is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Okay. So fine. You're not going to test me again. Okay. I get it. But Thursday, I was able to make an appointment at our local grocery store through the drive-through. You know, they're doing the one of the drive-through things.
Yep.
And those are an interesting experience in themselves. If you've had the COVID test, you know the nasal cavity that they go through, right?
The one where they actually shove the Q-tip to your brain stem.
Right.
And it actually touches your brain, and you can feel it throughout your whole body. Yeah. It sucks.
Yeah. So you've got that type of fun happening, and so now, you know, I'm coming into this and I'm going, all right, now I got to see what's happening here. I make an appointment to go get tested because I'm like, this can't be right.
Yeah.
So there's this drive-through, and you literally go through. You know, you go through the pharmacy drive-through. They ship it over the little tube. You pull up, you have your little card that they send you, and they give you a little voucher, and you have a time slot, and you go in your time slot, and they send it over the tube, and you sit in your car, and everybody's kind of sealed off, and you're looking through the window, and the lady's going to walk you through. You know, this is like the Total Recall thing where you stick the gun up in your nose.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there, and you're opening this thing up, and, you know, here comes the stick, and you're like, now stick that in your nose. I was like, I did it. You got to do this by yourself now.
Oh, they let you do it to yourself?
Oh, yeah. You got to do this by yourself.
No way. Couldn't do it.
So now you've got to do the Total Recall thing, you know, where the gun goes up, and you're like, and you're sitting there, and I'm grabbing the wheel, and I'm like, oh,
that's brutal.
And up it goes, and you're like, oh, and you're gagging.
Yep.
And then she's sitting there, and she's like, nope, hold it there. And then she starts counting for you. And then you pull it out, you get through it. Awful experience. You put it in the little cap, and here's where it gets even more great because, again, rural Iowa, we got to do what we got to do. I got it. Nobody's touching you, and nobody's touching your sample. They literally have a makeshift trash can. And I think I sent you a picture of this.
Yeah, yep.
So I'll make sure I put it on here
for trash
in
only,
post so you can see it. Like you literally had this like trash can. It was sitting outside. It was about 40 degrees that day.
Yep.
You walked out of your car and you dumped it in. And the problem was there were so many people there, and there were so many samples. The trash can was overfilling, so I had to like stuff my hand down to push all these disgusting samples down just to get my sample into the thing. And I was like, oh.
So you had to touch other people's samples. Something wrong with that.
Oh, it was awful. And so anyway, you get through that. And so now here I am again, same situation I was last Saturday, 7 days later. First sample, negative. Well, guess when this one's coming back? This one's coming back on Thursday. You know, the following Thursday.
Sure.
So at this point, I start to get a little bit better. They find out I have them. I go in to the hospital that day. Again, we pull blood. We do the influenza test. We do a full throat culture. We do a chest scan, the whole 9 yards, right? So because at this point, we're thinking, there's no way that you have COVID, but you've got to have something else.
Got to have pneumonia or something.
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but when you do the strep test, the strep only tests a couple types of strep. It doesn't test a full panel.
Yep.
So you could not only have strep, you could have a different type of strep, or you could have a different type of germ. They found some germ in my throat. Germ negative is what they call it. It's a type of germ that gets in your throat and it comes through the dirt. Now, whether this COVID had exacerbated that inside of what was happening, I don't know.
You haven't been grave digging again, have you?
Right. Well,
I mean,
it's
I knew
it's
that was a
Iowa,
hobby
so
that I've heard
there
you
is
had.
dirt out here in the air.
Yeah, that's true. It is
You
harvest
know.
season.
So anyway, we go through that, and you get through it. And so not only I had COVID, now I got this germ thing. Well, they don't find out until I have COVID. Until at this particular point, I didn't find out until Thursday. Now, that Thursday, the next Friday, I would be in, because that was my second test. Now I go back into quarantine again because I'm still waiting for that result to come back out.
And they want you to quarantine for 2 weeks, right?
Right.
10 days.
So
10 weeks.
now the Friday comes up again. Now I've been in two. Now that next Friday, now I'm in for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that'll drive you crazy.
I
in
don't
itself.
get a call. Now this goes back to your contact tracing. I did not get a call until Saturday. This would have been 16 days later, roughly
Wow.
7 days after the original test. The contact tracing nurse calls me up Saturday about 5 o'clock and goes, "Oh, by the way, we saw your test results that came in on Thursday from the test you took on Saturday." I said, "Wait a second. You're saying you found this 7 days later, but you didn't get report?" And she, again, system's backed up. She goes, "We're 48 hours behind. When the tests come in,
Wow.
they've got to load up to the system, right?"
So they asked you how many people you came into contact with, and you said, "Oh, probably 800." I mean,
Right. So this is the whole point with the system that I have. So I don't find out until day 16, 7 days ago, that I had COVID. And then 7 days before that, I had tested negative. So you were out there 16 days with a COVID negative test,
thinking you didn't have it, and you did.
saying you didn't have it. Now, luckily, because I was getting retested and I felt like crap, I just stayed in quarantine.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to work anyway. I was tired. I had all the stuff. My throat was killing me. I was honestly too sick to go to work. So I was just naturally in quarantine. And then at that point, she calls me and she goes, "Well, I had felt pretty good. I wasn't 100%, but," she goes, "Well, you're cleared to go back to work on Monday because you've been in quarantine for 2 weeks. And this is clearly, at this point, you're over it."
You're lucky that you had the luxury of not going to work, because a lot of people don't have that luxury.
Well,
People that work in factories
let's-
or on assembly lines and stuff like that, they have to go to work whether they're sick or not usually.
And that's true. And, I'm not sure if I would, yes, it's, I think we're all fortunate for those of us that can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, that being said, my symptoms were severe enough that really up until day 8 or 10, I wasn't really in shape that I could have gone back to work. I mean, up until that following, after the 2 week quarantine, all last week was my first week back out of quarantine, and I was maybe 50%. This is my second week out of quarantine, and I'm still like,
I hate to tell you this, but I had it on March 3, and I still have a little bit of the cough. Still,
yeah, and
it's going to last a while.
I've heard that from a lot of people that have the cough. They say it does last for a little bit.
Yep.
And not only that, you're tired. I don't know when that kind of goes away, or.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an immediate recovery. I know it was really bad for me for a week, and then the second week, I was just completely out of it for 2 weeks. The second week, I was pretty much bedridden, and you finally get to the point where even if you feel like crap, you've got to get up and do something. I mean, I don't care how bad you feel. You can only stay in bed for so long.
And I think that was one of the other things that I tried to do, even though I felt horrible. And this isn't necessarily a COVID thing, but when you're sick at any time, you try to get up to do what you can do. I mean, now
I forced
granted,
myself
that's
to
not-
get on the treadmill
Right.
for like
I mean,
10 minutes a day.
Yeah, I've got a Peloton bike, and I was able to get my butt on that thing at least for 20 minutes. Now you're not doing a hard workout by any means, but
You
you're sitting
get to
there and
keep
just
your blood
moving your leg.
flowing, and yeah. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
get leg cramps and all that other stuff.
Right.
So
And your house is never as clean as what it.
no,
My house was immaculate for like 2 weeks. I would get up. I'm like, what am I gonna do? I've got a 4-year-old lab that sheds everywhere, and it's you come through and I go. When I built the house, I put hardwood floors in that are brown, and I put a white lab in here, and I'm like, it was
yeah.
a monumentally stupid mistake.
I did more dusting than I've ever done. To the point where I bought this little guy. This is one of those battery powered dusters. It's rechargeable,
Oh.
and I literally go through my office still. I've made a habit out of it, and I dust everything with this stupid little blower. It's hilarious.
You want to take a moment to put that is that an Amazon find? Do you want to?
Yeah, it is. It is an
Is that-
Amazon find. Yeah, we should.
Is that one of those amazing things that you find on Amazon?
It is. It's Opolar is the brand. Opolar. It's an air duster.
Is that something you would recommend to the rest of us?
Highly, because it's better. I used to buy the cans, and you'd get a 4-pack, a 6-pack, whatever. But this one was like $70, and you never have to buy another can, and the pressure is actually higher than the cans anyway. So it's very good, very good
And
quality.
I would say, does that does it suck or does it blow?
It blows. It
so,
blows.
so so it's still blowing the dust all around. So you're just continuously dusting. You're just blowing it somewhere else.
But I have an air filter in my studio here, so
okay. So we're blowing it off,
It
and
gets
we're
it into
hoping
the
the air
air. As long as I can get it airborne, then the filter will filter it out.
All right, so we're not shop vacuuming anything. We're not
No,
actually taking
no,
care of it right there.
no.
We're just
It's just blowing.
blowing it all around.
But it gives me something to do. When it lands again, then I have something else to do.
I didn't get that sore throat until I was in your place. Maybe you were blowing that stuff all the way around. And then,
Yeah.
and then I sat down, and then it came into.
That's true. It could have been the foam on the microphone, because those are from China too. These little foam things are from China. It could be from Wuhan. I mean, they might be made out of bat wings.
It's reasonably disgusting. So let's take a break and come back right after this. We're back to J&M. We're just picking up where we had left off. We were talking a little bit about COVID and our individual cases. And, I think we're just talking a little bit offline. And, your question was, how do you think this is going so far? And I said, honestly, I think it comes down to you don't hear a lot of people talking about what their individual cases are because they're so different. And the other problem is that you have is there's this big public shaming factor that people don't want to talk about. They're like,
they don't want to admit they've
now,
been sick.
I go out and I tell people I have COVID, and they move back like 15
I know. Even I said it to people way back in March, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not spreading it anymore. I've come into contact with it since then, and I'm not getting it again. It's there's a fear out there, and it's an illogical fear.
Interesting. It's interesting in how you're consuming your media and how you're consuming, quote unquote, your science. Now, and one of the things that I particularly hate, and I think we've had this conversation before, and it gets into politics just a little bit, but we should be able to agree on what the facts are. But that being said, or what the science is even. But when you talk about something new like COVID or any of these things, or science in general, science has been built on two opposing facts. I mean, we don't necessarily know that's the whole point of science. So when they sit there and they say follow the science, that to me is a little bit ridiculous because you're going to have two opposing opinions on this. It's like saying, back in the 1400s there, the earth is flat. Well, there was two opposing theories.
Well, just remember, it wasn't that long ago when somebody was having psychological issues or mental retardation or whatever, they were drilling holes in people's heads to let demons out. That was science. Don't forget
I had that done last week. Are you saying
Did you? Did it work?
Yeah. They still do that here in rural Iowa.
They still do the drilling.
I mean, according to CNN
Yeah.
and everybody in New York and LA, I mean, it's right
Is
here.
it right there? Okay.
They go in right behind your ear, so it looks like it's normal.
Yeah, they
Nobody
do
ever
still.
asked any questions.
They still do the ECTs, the electroconvulsive therapies. They still in Des Moines. No, I'm not kidding you. In Iowa Lutheran Hospital, they still do the electric shock treatments.
It's funny that you bring that up because I had heard something like this, and I was talking with somebody. Have you ever heard of cold shower theory?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I've never heard of it, and I thought it was totally. I was like, what is this? And they were telling me like, well, you should start taking a cold shower. Now, if you
Yeah.
don't know what a cold shower is or cold shower theory, it's basically you take a cold shower, which is what they say, 70 degrees or below for anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And you should do that somewhere between 2 or 3 times a week. And it's supposed to build your immune system. And it's
amongst other things.
right.
Tony Robbins. I don't know if you know. Do you know who Tony Robbins is? The speaker.
Right.
He actually has in his home in Florida. He actually has a small hot tub shaped thing that it's cryogenically cold. It's like 100 degrees below zero. And he, before his performances, before he goes to speak to large crowds, he actually dips into this thing, goes in and out a couple of times just to bring his body temperature down. And I'm not exactly sure what it does, but Joe Rogan does the same thing. They have cryogenic things that they stand in. So there's a lot of people doing this, a lot of people that believe in it.
All right. So we're going to have to, inside of building our new studio, we're going to have an ice bath that we're going to jump in and out of.
If Tony Robbins says it works, I mean,
listen, I think there's something to it, but you brought up electroshock therapy.
Yes.
And it was funny to me when I first heard of this. I'm like, and they're talking about shocking the system. And I'm literally reading about this. I'm like, well, this is ironically like the same thing as electroshock therapy.
Yeah.
And they had brought up the fact, and when you said among other things, one of the among other things that this is supposed to help with is mental disabilities and some of the stuff like that, because it's sort of, in a way, as the theory goes, okay, this isn't me talking, I didn't make the theory up, it sends your body into that same type of pattern that electroshock does. So it's that cold water, it's the
the doctor explained it to me, and my wife actually had the ECTs. Don't want to make that super public, but it's not a huge deal because we only have a couple thousand people watching this. But so for depression, she had the ECTs, and what it basically is it's a system reboot for your body and for your brain. So medications that previously worked that no longer work because your body gets used to them, it's a reset, and it doesn't just work for depression, it doesn't just work for the brain. I mean, the cryogenic theory is that it does a reboot on your, several systems within your body. And I mean, it makes sense when the doctors tell you.
I think, and this sort of goes back to the more encompassing point of where do you want to go with science, right?
Yeah.
So let me tell you something. On that same step, right? And I took it one step further, and I said, well, you can go out and you can find studies that now say, facial semens, if you will. I'm trying, yeah. Oh yeah. There's a whole science now that they say, these male facials that they can provide are very beneficial. And I'm like,
it wasn't the Jeffrey.
Right, here we go.
Wasn't the Jeffrey Epstein company that put that forward? Was it? Okay, Bill Clinton, maybe.
we can come up with whatever science we want, and I'm kind of sitting there going, and I think especially when if you just slip back to the cold water theory, you look at kind of the training that especially Navy SEALs do, and the beatdown they give those guys. The fact that they're basically in 55 degree water all the time.
Yep. Their bodies get used to it.
Yeah, their bodies get used to it, but it keeps down the inflammation and all the other things that we talk about. There probably is some sense to it.
When you can train the brain, it's not just your body necessarily, but you can. Part of I was watching a documentary on the Titanic, on history's greatest mysteries, with what's his name, Morpheus from the I forget the name of the movies now. Matrix, Morpheus, and the biggest battle, the biggest hurdle that the survivors had to overcome was the mental reaction to hitting that cold water. It wasn't necessarily that the body couldn't survive it. It's just that your brain tells you when you hit that cold water, you have to gasp. And when you're 20 feet underwater being drawn down, when you do that gasp, you bring that cold water into your lungs. That's what kills you. It's not the temperature of the water right away. So I thought that was very interesting. I had not really heard that before. You just assume that the people are floating there forever, but the reality is that most people died almost instantly because they brought that cold water into their lungs. So they didn't
Yeah,
suffer for hours like the movie tries to tell you they did.
right. I've heard several studies like that, and again, when you kind of come back and you want to start having reasonable conversations with people, and the type of media or the type of when it comes to science, there's going to be opposing views. That's the whole point of science. And so when somebody says, well, you got to follow the science, well, listen, if you want to follow Fauci, that's one opinion. There's hundreds of opinions out there that, quite frankly, are getting censored on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. I mean, there was 2 doctors in California that came out and gave their opinion on what they were seeing on the front lines, just like we had talked about. Here we are in flyover country in rural Iowa, looking at what is really happening on the ground with your average person just walking in through the front door. I mean, we're not huge celebrities. We're just walking in the front door. Nobody knows us. That's what we're seeing here. And they're censoring these opinions, and they're not letting them get out. Yeah. And that's a scary part. I mean, I don't know if this is going to make it out, if we'll not get canceled on YouTube, or if it's going to get out there. I don't know. I mean, they go, are we going to get flagged because we're fake news, because we're telling them what's being, it's against the grain. It's not trying to make it up.
Let me add some science. Happening. Let me add some science to this. My father-in-law, who's a radiologist in Michigan, he's the one that does all the chest X-rays, and he works at the big hospital in Grand Rapids. So he said when this all started, he told my wife, don't listen necessarily to anything anybody else is telling you, but he said, we are all going to get this. It's just a matter of time. Even with a vaccine, we are all going to get COVID. And all they're doing, and they told us this at the beginning, is slow the curve, lower the curve. But he told us from the very beginning, you're going to get it. And he suggested breathing. There's all kinds of exercises you can do to increase your ability to breathe air, bring in oxygen, things like that. And so he sent us a YouTube video and said, start doing these things, start exercising your lungs, and the chances are you'll survive it. And that's what we did. And it worked.
And that was the point from the very beginning. I mean, from the very beginning, we had talked about, we had said, listen, the whole point of the lockdown and everything was to quote unquote flatten the curve. It was never not to get it. It was never to lock down everything. It was to make sure that that we all got it at different points. I mean, it's an uncontrollable virus that nobody has antibodies for.
You just don't want the hospital. If you need a respirator, you just don't want to show up at the hospital and there not be a respirator available.
Right.
I think that's the key.
I just talked with a gentleman.
And that's the last thing. And that's one thing he did say is, a respirator is a last ditch effort. Once you go on a respirator, the chances are you will not come off of it alive. Yes. That's the truth.
And that's, most people have said that same thing. And I was talking with a gentleman yesterday he was located in Chicago, and we were just having a conversation like this. And he was telling me, his words, I don't know if this is true, but this is the problem that I have. And this is what I told him. I was like, it's like, well, 95% of the beds in Chicago at this time period are full. And he goes, the issue is what if you have a heart attack or any other stuff coming in there? Those beds aren't available. Now, that being said, I said, are you sure about those numbers? I mean, I'm not trying to be obstinate or make it up. But, when you talk about facts, those should be very publicized facts that are on every news channel. Doesn't matter which one you pick, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC. Those should be reported numbers that are just said, these are what the simple facts are. I mean, it's really simple.
I wonder if we could even get access to that. If we called your local hospital and said, hey, I want to know how many beds you have. I wonder if they would even tell us that.
Yeah, I think... well, look at Kim Reynolds here in Iowa. When you talk about that, they're not necessarily showing you the raw data. They're telling you what the raw data is. And I think they get, I think there's something inside the medical community that sort of believes that if they have this full transparency and you're able to see the raw data, you're going to end up kind of like the toilet paper incident where people are going to go into panic mode if it is that bad, right? So let's say it is that bad.
It is that
all
bad.
Of a sudden people are like, oh my God, now we got to panic. The other side of that is, what if it's not that bad and those ICU beds are really only 5 to 7%? And I live literally, right over here, right across from the hospital. And I can tell you that for, not saying this period of time, but certainly throughout the summer and early on, and we heard about this through a few media resources anyway, that they were actually laying off a lot of specialists, a lot of doctors, because there weren't, especially when it came to general surgery and things like that.
Yeah, they were postponing it.
There were so many beds available and not enough people. I mean, it's simple supply and demand. And so they were, all these frontline workers were getting to get laid off because there weren't enough people in there. Now, here we are, end of November, December, things are a little bit different.
Are things getting back to normal? I don't know. I don't know if things are getting back to normal. In Des Moines, I've heard they're not. A friend of the family is a nurse at a major hospital in Des Moines, Mercy, and he says it's getting worse. That they're asking for people to put in overtime, and people don't want to keep putting in this overtime, and it wears on you.
Yeah, and I certainly see that, and I think there's a couple of things that should be reflected on, and nobody's talking about this. And again, I think it's just a huge disservice of the larger media when we talk about the preparedness of what we need to be doing in our healthcare system. We're going to talk about that after we take a quick break. We'll be right back with J&M. All right, Monte, we were just talking about some of the preparedness that a lot of the hospitals that we're talking about. And I kind of wanted to talk about this because, as I was saying in the last segment, that when we talk about how to prepare these hospitals and all the ventilators and all the things that come with this, nobody really kind of thinks about, what is the right amount. And you were talking about, or we were just talking about how many beds you should have and the amount of overtime and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. The fact is, you can't build these hospitals so big that, you can't build them for, a once in 50-year pandemic that has all these extra beds.
China tried to, and they ended up with some flimsy buildings that are probably going to fall down on people soon.
Right. And you can't sustain a healthcare system like that that's prepared for necessarily, a 50-year flood, if you will, for all these years. So you do have to have some of these backup plans of, do you start using like convention centers or stuff like that versus, some of these hospitals. So when you get into these systems where you see some of these ICU beds start to fill up, so let's say if that is the case at, 95% or better, there should be a plan in there where you say, at least in, Chicago or, Chicago is using McCormick Place, or, go pick whatever your major convention center is or whatever your major hub is. Yeah. Plan to use those facilities inside of those situations and being able to divert to that.
Well, I guess one of the main questions is we weren't really ready for COVID-19, but has this woken us up so that we realize, hey, this is just the first big one to come along. There could potentially be viruses that are worse than this coming down the pike at us. And how do we prepare for that ahead of time? Just imagine if we would have had a couple year lead on COVID, how we could have prepared the therapeutics and everything, the vaccines and all that. Now
you don't know you just have no idea what's coming down.
Well, I think that they should go catch all the bats in Wuhan and test them for
no more soup.
No more bat soup.
I blame Campbell's soup for their bat soup. That was the problem.
So Campbell do they have bat soup? I don't know.
Well, there goes a sponsor that we're not going to get.
Yep. No, we'll probably get sued. That's all right.
But to your point, I don't know. How do you prepare for a pandemic? You said, this really wasn't that big. The survival rate of this is what, 99.8% roughly.
Yeah, I think it's 0.4% is the fatality rate.
And we're still not anywhere near at least the numbers that we were, and when we look at the Hong Kong flu in '68, or you want to talk about the
swine flu.
Yeah. We haven't seen a real serious deadly pandemic come through.
Well, you have to keep in mind that back then, the 1918, the Black Plague, and all those types of things, we didn't have travel like we do now. Now somebody can get on a jet and go around the world in what, 16 to 18 hours, practically go to the other side of the world. So that's going to change things drastically as well. Ability to travel around the world in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and the other thing that you can debate all you want, but had we had a Democrat president there, and I know this from if you work with the food or the FDA business, when you look at warp speed and you look at the time that it takes to take an average vaccination to get there, and again, everybody came through and they weren't on board with this Trump vaccination. Matter of fact, they came out, don't take it, don't trust it, which was just a total disservice to everybody, quite frankly, humanity in itself. Now, granted, do what you want to do with your vaccinations, but don't come out there and just say because you're against the president, don't do it. My point here being this: warp speed took out a lot of the bureaucracy and red tape. Now, you could say, did it make it safe? There's so much red tape in these types of situations that you have to step back and kind of take a look and say, what are the risks of removing some of this?
Exactly.
What is just plain old 90% red bureaucracy tape of the last, 250 some years that we've been a union that's just year after year. I mean,
well, it's just like taxes.
If they were able to do this with warp speed, they should probably look at doing it with everything straight across the board.
Maybe. It depends. Have you seen the movie I Am Legend with Will Smith?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, he had a cure for cancer. I realize this is just a movie, but has to make you wonder. He had a cure for cancer, and it turned everybody into these animal zombies, basically, everybody that took the vaccine. I'm sure that's not going to happen, but... you know what? If you're going to go with something, go with that. Go with, the Trump vac. I wish the Democrat Party was, you're going to turn into an animal zombie. I can buy that one. I can totally go. Zombie. You haven't done enough testing to take this vaccination to prove to me that you're not going to turn me into an animal zombie. Yeah.
I'm not taking it until I see that proof.
That's right. I mean, it didn't look like a fun lifestyle that those people had.
No, you know what? If you're going to stick your foot in the sand on that one, that's the one to hang on. Like, I don't want to be an animal zombie. I want the FDA. I want Fauci to come out on national TV and say, you're not going to turn into an animal zombie if you take the vaccination. At that point,
I want to hear that. Yeah. I want to hear that. Maybe from Will Smith. Maybe we make him the maybe Biden taps. Biden should tap him for the Homeland Security person or whatever. The next Fauci is Will Smith.
100%. Like, aren't we that type of society? Until we hear from celebrities. I mean,
well,
God knows it's not true until we hear from Will Smith.
We elected one president, so I mean,
I
don't think that's outside the realm of possibility.
Unless I hear from somebody officially from LA, I just can't believe it. I need confirmation from somebody out there.
Oh my, we're gonna have Kevin Hart commenting on the flu vaccines now, aren't we?
Yes, get out there. I can see the amount of guests now coming in next week, guaranteeing that we're not going to be animal zombies because of the new Biden vaccination.
Please get Rachel Maddow on to talk about something. That's all I'm saying.
How awesome would that be?
That would be
Rachel
great.
Maddow, animal zombie. I mean, I could act. Had Trump got reelected, it wouldn't be far off. I mean, I think that's the type of show that we should start doing.
I think we could get her to say animal zombie. If we got her on, I think we could get her to say it.
I think that challenge is accepted. My challenge is now to make it on MSNBC.
Yep.
And to tell her to be that Midwest guy. Like, I'm so concerned about being an animal zombie. And to do it in like some semi-serious way. I said, listen, Rachel,
you saw the movie.
There's a lot of things that we have to worry about, and some of these antibodies are very close to possibly frogs or pigs. I don't want to have my DNA mixed somehow with this, futuristic, fast, unsafe vaccination that could possibly have some side effects that would turn me into an animal or, give me some sort of disease that pigs might have. I don't want that.
Everything in Hollywood is based on some sort of truth, right? I mean, it has to be possible.
I think it absolutely has to be possible. But we have gone from talking about what the true science is,
Yeah.
to talking about what sort of the science is, to now we're into apocalyptic zombie land in the last part of this segment, which I think is fantastic.
You know, in that world, I'm gonna rule, dude, because I'm not gonna get that vaccine. I'm gonna be the Will Smith with the German Shepherd, walking around with a high-powered rifle, driving the new Mustangs and stuff like that down the streets of New York City. That's gonna be me.
Well, I mean, I think we should be looking at what some of the real benefits are about having a potential animal zombie vaccination. For home defense. There's a few things out there.
Oh, I think you could totally sell an animal zombie line of weapons. Yeah, traps, things like that. Lure, food, bait.
I didn't even think about the marketing behind the animal zombie, or the animal zombie part of it. But yeah,
T-shirts.
that's
T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies. Who wouldn't buy an animal zombie sweatshirt or hoodie?
We're going to sell that on our website,
Etsy.
JNM. You can check that out. We're going to start plugging the animal zombie vaccination stuff. I know Biden's out there. He's going to push 100 days of masks, and he's going to push these vaccinations. And I think we should be very concerned about becoming a.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, everybody has to buy masks now. Why don't we put animal zombie on the masks? Because I mean,
this is going to be coming out as part of our new merch. I went so far to go with this one. We're all mad here. So,
do you wear that around town? Do you?
Here in the Midwest, the
Yes.
flyover country,
Yep.
they wouldn't be so smart to know what that means.
No,
they
no.
couldn't possibly get it. At least until we have somebody from Hollywood to explain to us what that is, and then it's all good.
Yeah. Kevin Hart's perfect for that.
Well, why don't we go ahead and wrap up this week? We've, I think, hit everything here, and we've got some new merch that's going to be coming out, the Animal Zombie line, which is going to be great. And any final thoughts for this week on anything in general that we missed?
The only thing I can think of is just buy Animal Zombie products. They're for you.
You're going to see it soon on our website. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.